All right, welcome everyone. We are going to jump into 9-6 today. We are going to be skipping around our notes, so make sure you are paying attention to each section we are working on. We're on our last form of solving, and it is my favorite way to solve. We're going to skip this little review here. We're going to jump down here to solving methods. So far in chapter 9, we have reviewed, or we have solved in 3 different ways. Our first way was by graphing. The second way was by square rooting, and the third way was by factoring. Okay. Now, a couple weaknesses of all of these. Sometimes our graphs can't quite give us a good indicator of what our answer is. Sometimes we can't square root things. Sometimes we can't factor things. So the weaknesses of all 3 of those is sometimes they don't work. Whereas this method that I'm about to show you, it always works. We can always get an answer from this. Okay. So this right here is the quadratic formula. I hope this looks familiar. You will have to have this memorized. Reminder how we get this A, this B, and this C in this equation is we're pulling this from this equation here. So when we get our problems, we get our A and our B and our C from those spots there in our equation. And also a reminder, notice how the equation goes in order. If it does not go in order, you have to move things around so then we know our A and our B and our C. All right, we're going to see some familiar steps to things that we've done. So as I said, we're going to find our A, B, and C. And just like when we were factoring, you need to make sure your equation equals 0 first. If it does not, you're not able to do our quadratic formula yet. We're going to plug A, B, and C into our equation, and then we're going to simplify. And when we do that, we're always going to use our calculator. That will give us all of our answers. Okay. When we have our results, when we have our answers, there's 3 different ways we might find our answers today. We might have 0 answers, we might have 1 answer, and we might have 2 answers. 0 happens because sometimes our parabola does not cross the x-axis, so you would have 0 solutions. We will have 1 answer when it crosses it just once, so that's how we get 1 answer. And usually our parabola crosses twice, and that's how we get 2 answers. We also know we're going to usually get 2 answers because we have a plus minus here. A plus minus means we have a positive answer and a negative answer. Okay. All right. Now, if I am going too fast, please make sure you are pausing and rewinding as you need this video to do well. All right. So we're going to do a couple examples. We're going to do a couple word problems, and then we will be done. All right. So as I'm looking at these 4 problems here, they all equal 0, so step 1 is done for us. So then we're going to identify our A, B, and our C. Now, it might be a good idea to start off before you go on to write the equation somewhere on your paper, just so you don't have to keep flipping back and forth. And also a reminder, you should have this memorized, so the more you write it down, the more like you're going to remember it. All right, so number 1 here, it equals 0, so now I'm going to find my A, B, and C. This X word really has a 1 in front of it, so that's really my A. Here's my B, and here's my C. All right, so now I'm going to plug it in the formula. Notice the formula says negative B, but my B is already negative, so I'm actually going to say this is positive. So I'm going to have X equals positive 4, so whatever your B is, you just flip the sign. And now here it's super important you make sure you're plugging in the right stuff, and you're also putting parentheses around. That will help you later when you plug it into your calculator. So I'm going to say negative 4 squared minus 4, that's just part of the equation, the minus 4 is just there, and now times our A and our C, so times 1 and times 4, and this is all divided by 2a. That's what people probably struggled on when we were first doing chapter 9. So I'm going to take 2 times 1, and now it's a matter of plugging into your calculator. Now, I have a lot of people think they should plug the whole thing in. Your calculator is actually not smart enough. So the first thing I need you to do is just find out what's inside here, okay? Notice I have parentheses around the negative 4. Your calculator is not smart enough, so just plugging in this part here, do not square root it. So all we're going to be left with then is 4 plus or minus. You're finding out what side in there, and then on the bottom here we just have 2 times 1, so I'm going to have 2. So when we plug this into our calculator, so we're taking negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1, and when we do that, we are getting 0. Okay. Now I hope some alarm bells are going off. When we take the square root of 0, we're just going to get 0. So there's really no such thing as positive negative 0, so I don't really have to worry about this. So this 0 and the plus minus are just going to go away. So all we're left with is 4 divided by 2, which equals 2. So this one is kind of interesting in the fact that you just have one answer. So that tells us it crosses the x-axis at just 2. Okay. Now this next one is going to be a little bit different again. Again, our A is really a 1 here. So I'm going to have A, B, and C. So I'm going to have x equals negative 2 plus or minus, and then I'm going to have 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 5 all over 2 times 1. Again, all what I want you to do is plug in what's in this square root here. Do not square root, do not divide, do not plus minus, just plug in what's in that rectangle. So we're left with that negative 2 chilling out front. And inside here, when we figure this all out, we're getting negative 16. And on the bottom, we should have 2. Now I hope some alarm bells are going off again. Can we square root a negative? Absolutely not. Our calculator will freak out. So this is when we have the no solution. This means our parabola is not crossing the x-axis, okay? So there is the difference between no answers and one answer. So I'll give you a hint. The next two will have 2 answers. So they'll all be a little bit different. All right, so our next one, we have our A, our B, and our C. So we're just going to plug it into our formula. So I'm going to say x equals negative 6. That's a negative 6 there. Plus or minus, we're going to have 6 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times negative 1. Double, triple check your negatives when you guys are plugging this stuff in. That's where silly mistakes are made. And on the bottom here, we have 2 times negative 2. We're grabbing our calculators. We are just plugging in this part of our calculator. Okay, so we're taking 6 squared, and then we're going to say minus 4 times negative 2 times negative 1. And when we do that, we are getting positive 28 all over negative 4. All right, so this is our first one that's actually going to work out. 28 is not a perfect square, so we actually are going to need our calculator. Now, here's where it probably got challenging the first time we saw this in Chapter 9. We have a positive and negative, so we have to kind of split our problem into 2 to represent the plus and the minus. So I'm going to say negative 6 plus the square root of 28 divided by negative 4. And I'm going to say negative 6 minus the square root of 28 all over negative 4. Okay, now here's where it's really important you plug this in your calculator properly. I'm actually going to go to my calculator so you guys can see this. So when we plug this in, you want to plug in the top part first. So we're going to plug in that negative 6. We'll do the plus one first. We'll go in order. And we have the square root. If you have my calculator, if you have a graphing calculator, you're going to hit second and the x squared button. Every calculator is a little bit different. And then we're going to take 28. And then I want you to hit enter. Okay, now that's not our answer because we still have to do something. We still have to take that and divide it by negative 4. Okay, so that's actually our answer. So that's our first answer, and we're always going to round it to 2 place values. So I'm going to have 0.1, and that 7 is going to go up to an 8. Okay, so that's when we have a plus in between, and we'll do the other one. We'll do the minus. So I'm going to have negative 6 minus the square root of 28. We're going to hit enter, and then we're going to divide by negative 4. And that is our second answer. So I'm going to say x equals, and we have 2.8, and it doesn't round up, so it's going to be 2. So that's how we do that on the calculator. You have to figure out the top part first, and then your last step is always to divide. Okay? All right, we will do the other one real quick. If I can bring my notes back. Oh, that's not you guys. Sorry, guys. There they are. All right. So we have our last one here like this. So again, I have my A, my B, and my C. So I'm going to say x equals negative 2 plus or minus 2 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 4, sorry, times negative 4, all over 2 times 3. So I'm going to be honest, you guys, the trickiest part of this is just plugging it in correctly and then plugging in your calculator correctly. All right, so we have to figure out this part first. I hope you guys are practicing with your calculators because, as I said, that's what you're struggling on the most probably. So I'm going to have negative 2 plus or minus. And when we plug this part in our calculator, we're going to get positive 52. So that tells us we're about to get 2 answers. And on the bottom here, we have positive 6. Oh, that's an ugly 6, positive 6. All right, so now we're going to split it between 2 problems. So I have negative 2 plus the square root of 52 over 6, and negative 2 minus the square root of 52 over 6. I'm not going to put this in our calculator. I want to save you guys time. So now again, we're going to plug this into our calculator. And top part first, and then divide by 6. And when we do that, this first one is going to equal 0.87. And this other one is going to equal negative 1.54. So if you're getting really crazy answers, it's probably because you're plugging it into your calculator wrong. All right, so that is the quadratic formula. We do have to have that memorized. All right, we're going to skip ahead a little bit because I want us to get to some word problems. So I'm going to have you guys flip past this page, flip past, and I'm going to have you guys go right to here. So something we haven't talked about yet is what if it doesn't equal 0? So your first step if it doesn't equal 0 is to move over whatever that is. But keeping in mind, you need to make sure you're still going in the same correct order, okay? So I'm going to minus the 21 because that's the only thing that's over there. So now I have x squared. And reminder, the x has to go before that regular number. So I'm going to have negative 4x minus 21 equals 0, okay? Now that it equals 0, we can do exactly what we just did on that last page. So you are going to have some problems, you guys, that does not equal 0 for you. So that's just going to be your first step. And then we just plug it in. I see my negative 4 is negative, so I have to flip sign. So I'm going to have positive 4. We have negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 28. Again, super make sure you're putting parentheses around all your negatives. Your calculators aren't smart enough. And then we have 2 times 1. All right, so we're going to figure out what's inside here first. Do not square root. Do not do anything just inside that rectangle. When we do that, I'm going to get plus or minus the square root of 100. I hope some alarm bells are going off into your head. And on bottom, we're going to have 2. So this problem, I am going to split it between the positive and negative, but I'm hoping everyone remembers 100 is a perfect square. So we are going to have 4 plus 10 divided by 2, and we're going to have 4 minus 10 divided by 2. This one here, when we plug that one in, we are going to get 7. And this one here, we are going to get negative 3. Okay. So today you're going to have the quadratic formula where some of them equal 0 already for you, and some of them you're going to have to fix it like this first. All right. The other thing you're going to see today are some word problems, but again, our quadratic formula is basically going to do everything for you. So this problem is saying that we have someone who is throwing a heavy ball up in the air. It makes this arc here on this graph. And we have this equation here where x represents the horizontal distance and y represents the height. We want to know how far that ball is going. So if I look here, this is where the girl or guy is starting, and they throw the ball. So this right here is how far it goes, okay? Now before, when we've done problems like this, we usually care about the highest point here, but today we want to know how far it gets from this person to this person. So that's what we're really asking ourselves. So luckily, x represents our distance, whereas y represents our height. Now, we have to take this equation and we have to be able to use the quadratic formula. So if I look at this point here, the ball is on the ground. And if the ball is on the ground, it means it has a height of 0. So if y represents our height and our height is 0, I'm going to take my equation there and I'm going to plug 0 in for my height. So now I have negative 0.04x squared plus 0.84x plus 2. Now, I don't know about you, I think that'd be a very hard problem to factor. So if you can't factor, you use the quadratic formula. All right, this is for sure why you have a calculator today. These get crazy with the decimals. So I'm plugging it into the quadratic formula. So I'm going to have negative 0.84 plus or minus. I'm going to have 0.84. Super important you're watching your positives and your negatives on these problems, and especially your decimals, because what I'm going to do here, I'm going to have negative 4, and we have to notice we're multiplying by negative 0.04. So make sure you have all of your decimals and things, and we're going to times it by 2. On the bottom here, again, double check your positives and negatives and decimals. So I'm going to have 2 times negative 0.04. Okay. We are going to plug what's in the square root into our calculator, and we're going to get kind of a crazy decimal on this one. So when we plug this in, we are going to get plus or minus the square root of 1.0256, and it's all over. Again, you might want to grab your calculator for this. We're going to take 2 times negative 0.04, and when we do that, we're going to get negative 0.08. Now, unlike all of our problems so far that we've done with the quadratic formula, when we have positive and negative, we are still going to do both of these, the plus and the minus, but this time our answer means kind of something else. So I'll talk about that in a second. So I'm going to split this. I have negative 0.84 plus the square root of 0.0256 divided by negative 0.08, and then we're going to do the minus. Again, double checking, are you plugging everything in correctly? Now, this time, when we solve these, when I do this one with the plus, and I plug it into the calculator, reminder, do the top, and then your last step is always to divide. When I do this one, I'm going to get negative 2.16. When I do this one, I'm going to get 23.16. Now, if we go back to what we were finding, reminder, I'm asking you how far from the person did the ball go? Okay, so this first answer says negative 2.16. Can a ball travel negative 2.16? No, it cannot. So today on your word problems, the negatives are not possible. So this 23.16, is that how far a ball can go? Yes, someone can throw a ball 23.16 feet. Oh, yep, and now also make sure you label it with feet, okay? So on your word problems, you're going to set it equal to 0. You're going to use the quadratic formula, and then the positive is always your answer. Okay, set it equal to 0, quadratic formula, the positive is your answer. All right, good luck on your quadratic formula homework, and I will see you tomorrow.